Foster care. I didn't understand at the time. I just knew I was alone and I wasn't going home. I remember the incident happened the night before, and I remember getting to school the next morning and seeing all the people with name badges and nameplates, all the caseworkers, police officers, and whatnot. I remember taking me to the room, questioning me about everything, where all my scars and everything came from. I kept on telling them I fell from a jungle gym or a trip from soccer. It was constant reality at the time. It was something that I was trying to understand. I couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. So I want you guys to imagine at 10 years old, being a kid and being taken away from everything you've known, your home, your parents, your belongings, your sense of safety, and anything you had on to hold on for a sense of comfort. That was my reality at 10 years old. I was forced to grow up at a young age. Being placed in the system of foster care was something I just couldn't understand. I was navigating completely foreign terrain, and foster care was giving me an uncertain future for sure. Moving around shelter to shelter, home to home, that was the most time that everything just didn't feel right to me. Just something that was just different. I didn't left home with nothing at all, and that was my reality. And the system that I didn't understand, they basically just control your life. They control everything you do, where you go, government assistance, and just everything they provide for you. It wasn't family to me. It was survival, not stability. It was a lot to take in at a time. It was something devastating. I remember doing my intake to foster care. They had a little sheet where they do an intake for all the kids, and they write down like notes and things like that. And I remember my sheet. They checked off all these different things. Was mildly retarded, special needs, socially withdrawn. I still have that sheet to this day. That was kind of one of the most devastating things for me. Just trying to process everything, trying to understand it all. I remember my first night in the shelter. After that night of school, when school was over with, I couldn't go home. So they placed me in the shelter. And this was all in Ogden. Being placed in the shelter, I remember just the phone call that I just had with my mom, just talking to her on the phone, and just the hope that I would see her again. That's what kind of kept me that first night in the shelter. And that same night in arts and crafts class we did, I drew a heart, a big heart. And I said to mom, from DJ, and on her half of the heart, which was folded in half, I said, Mom, take care of yourself. I'm doing fine. Like I said, so I held on to that when I went in the shelter that first night. I was confused. I was trying to understand what was happening. The routine was we would get done with school. We got there, we got a little snack, a little activity, we do our homework, take a shower, and get ready to go to bed. That was a routine and to get ready for school. I was constantly growing at the time, so I didn't have clothes that kind of fit. When I left home with nothing. I just left home with the clothes on my back. So that was just something that was just different for me. I felt alone. I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like I didn't fit in. I couldn't even talk to anybody. I didn't have aunts and uncles, grandma, grandpa, brothers and sisters, anybody could just pick up the phone and call at a time. It was something that I went from having a home to not feeling like I belonged anywhere at the time. So that was probably one of the most devastating things for me in foster care. Just kind of having that sense of home being stripped away from you and not having nobody around for you that represented somebody you knew, that you comfortable speaking to or talking to. The internet wasn't what it was at the time, so I couldn't just pick up the phone and just call. I thought to myself, one day I get to see my mom again, get to see my family again. And, this thing kind of trying to work itself out. So I just held on to that phone call and those words that I wrote my mom. I remember being placed in schools, changing schools left and right. All the homes I went to, I remember there was so many problems, so many issues. I got blamed for everything. I felt like just walking on eggshells all the time. Everything I did was wrong. Everything that went wrong in the home was my problem. One home I went to, I was in Washington Terrace. I remember the incident just like no other. I was constantly always complaining about being hungry. And so every time I said, hey, I'm hungry, they're talking about you eat too much. Or you always complain about food or something. So I was like, well, I'm growing, like I gotta eat. Like, am I not supposed to eat? And there was an incident that happened one day that the oldest daughter had wrote in the laundry room with permanent marker. And she wrote that I'm hungry. And so after the school program, when I got moved around schools, I had showed up home later on and I was going downstairs to my room and the father of the home grabs me and he literally helps me up my shoulders and starts yelling in my face and like cussing me out, saying, oh, you ungrateful kid, you wrote on my wall and da 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 da, just starts ripping into me. So me just being shocked as soon as I walked in the house, I asked him like, okay, like, what are you talking about? He said, yeah, you always talk about you hungry. You wrote on my wall, you're an ungrateful child. So I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. So he continued, just kept on ripping a good one into me. And his wife pulled me aside and asked me, and she said, "Hey, like, did you do it?" I said, "Do what?" So I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." I said, "I just got home from school." So they took me downstairs to the laundry room. She showed me the writing on the wall. It was in permanent marker. It said, "I'm hungry." And I was like, "That's not even my handwriting. I have never been in the laundry room." And so she went in the room and was like talking, "Hey, like just tell the truth." I was like, "I am telling the truth. Like I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't even been in the laundry room to even be able to write that. Like I don't even know what are you talking about." And so eventually the oldest daughter came home. There was two daughters and another son. And the daughter comes home. She's like, "Oh, why does the house feel like there's a lot of commotion in the home?" And she's like, "Well, they was pointing at me like, oh, DJ wrote on the wall with permanent marker in the laundry room that he was hungry." And so she's like, "Wait, what do you mean?" So they all went downstairs to show her. And the moment they went to the lunch room to show her, she goes, "Uh-oh." And so the father's like, "Uh-oh, what?" And she said, "Well, I wrote that. I meant to write, I'm angry." So initially she was angry at her father for not giving her money to go to school and take care of stuff at school. And so he eventually took her to the room and ripped a good one in her and started like yelling at her, cussing her out. And so then the mom was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't believe you." And I was like, "Well, that's the problem. It's been a constant problem in this home. Every time I tell the truth about something, I'm still in the wrong." I was like, "I can never do anything right all the time." And so those more incidents that happened at home like that I kept on consuming blaming, that was like the icing on the cake that kind of just blew everything over the top. And I remember getting a call from my caseworker, Justine, at the time, and she was like, "Hey, like, okay, we have to move you back to the shelter." I said, "Okay, that's fine with me." So I left that home and go back to the shelter. So it was like the constant back and forth of going in and out of the shelter. So that was one of the incidences. There was another incident happened in another home where they were using my money from the government that they were getting to pay their bills and rent and buy stuff for the other kids, and I never saw a dime of it. Those funds were supposed to be for buy like rollerblades, clothes, things of that nature, but I never saw anything. I never got clothes. I never got anything that was good. So those are kind of some of the things I dealt with in foster care. There's so many stories, so many homes that bounce around left and right too. The constant feeling of not feeling like you're included, feeling you're isolated, feel like you can't do anything wrong, just constantly just walking on eggshells. That was something that went around with me. There was no stability at all because I couldn't get comfortable because I knew I had to move around all the time. It was always something just rapidly, just get up, go, get up and go, get up and go. You could never feel comfortable at all. As soon as you get in the home, something would happen. Oh, got to pack up, get back to the shelter, or got to find another home for you. So that's what I dealt with all the time. And then on top of that, I had court every other single day. It felt like every other day I was in court. Trying to figure out where my mother was. I'm trying to figure out custody, trying to figure out what school I was going to go to, trying to get progress on everything because they had progress notes because I was warded the state at the time. So I couldn't even leave the state of Utah. So it was a lot to kind of go through to be warded the state. And so it was like the government became like my parents at the time, but I couldn't call, I couldn't do anything. All along, I just wanted to talk to my mom. I just want my family. Like that's what I wanted. But nobody would sit there and take the time to kind of hear my perspective. Everybody was just making choices without even really talking to me and then she asking me what I wanted. So that was a constant thing, and then I bounced around. I went from D Elementary to Washington Terrace to Sunset to Hillfield. Like I said, I bounced so many different schools even between there. It was just a constant school relocation. You go to school, things would happen. I struggled in school like crazy. Like the instability of finding stability kind of went along before me. I couldn't get comfortable. I couldn't trust anybody. All the people I was supposed to trust went behind my back and betrayed me. It was just left and right, and I had nobody to kind of work it out with or talk to or kind of share my feelings with. It was something that just kept on continuing going with me throughout foster care. Like I said, I was always constantly feeling like I was behind. I was constantly feeling like I couldn't just understand the system. Our education system back in Nigeria at the time was completely different than what it is here. Trying to get reintegrated to a country I was born in and left. I learned something completely different in another country, which was something that was devastating. In schools, like I said, I got the constant troubles that prolonged to constantly getting bullied a lot. I got made fun of. I had an accent. I had a strong accent at the time, so people would make fun of me all the time. They'd make fun of my skin color, call me darky, blackie, just make all jokes like that. They call me useless, African booty scratcher. So I'll constantly tell them to stop. Hey, stop messing around. I don't want to hear that. Leave me alone. leave me alone. I was snapping, trying to defend myself, then I was a problem. Teachers would do the same thing. I raise my hands to answer questions. They'll tell me stop asking stupid questions. And I was just trying to understand what's going on and trying to process everything, but nobody would take the time. So I started fighting, became angry. Then they were just constantly, oh, go to the principal's office, go talk to the principal. You're a problem, do this and that. So I just started trying to do what everybody else was doing, even with profanity, cussing people out. Like they'll constantly cuss me out and then try to flip it on me. And then I started listening to what they said and I just started interpreting the same thing they did, the behaviors they did. I was like, okay, if you do it, I'll do it too. And I never started anything. I never did. But I always made sure I finished it. I always made sure people learned their lesson. It was like constantly go to different school. I was like, okay, like that's fine with me. Like I didn't care at the time. Nobody would sit there listen to my side of the story. So I said, okay, I'll definitely make sure I finish it. So I started growing this mentality of getting get backs. It was all about get backs. You treat me wrong, I'll treat you 2 times worse. I'll definitely bring the gasoline can to the fire and the match and light it up for you. Make sure you feel my wrath. That's kind of mentality I kind of grew from there because nobody would hear what I had to say. So if you didn't want to listen to me, I just had to get your attention somehow, and make myself be seen and make myself be heard. So those labels kind of went with me, special ed, being called dumb, isolated. Like I said, a lot of people just didn't see the potential I had in me. The only person that saw potential was Allie in the shelter after she took me to shoot basketball. She was the first person to tell me that I was going to be somebody special. Like I said, and then I bounced around so many different places and without being seen, unheard of. Yeah, it was a lot to deal with at the time. So throughout this whole process, it was mentally exhausting for me as a kid, coming to another country, trying to find yourself, trying to figure out where you belong. Mine was just like, man, like I'm trying to do the right, talk to people, be respectful, but just the whole culture here in America was just completely different. You try to be nice to people take some type of like you trying to get something from them. Like back home, we just nice. You just talk to people. You know what I mean? Like just socially, just have a conversation with people. And here it's just different at the time. You trying to talk to people that look at you as like, oh, you trying to get something from them. But I'm like, I'm just trying to figure it out. And so that's something that just kind of prolonged with me for a long time, just trying to do the right thing. So I remember just bounce around home to home, going to so many different homes. Like I said, some were like a week, some were a couple weeks, some were a month. It was just a constant rotation, survival, not stability at all. Just trying to constantly seek that stability my whole childhood, from 10 years old all the way for that whole year. So, and then my mom, Miss Willender, she had read my story. Said I went through so many homes, and I remember she came and visited me, her and her family. They came and visited me. I was staying with a Caucasian lady, and so she was initially going to move to Hawaii. And so obviously I was warded the state, so the state became my parent, basically, guardian, so I couldn't leave the state. So she couldn't take me with her. So I remember they came and visited me in like the Washington Terrace, I'm in North Ogden area. And so, I was sitting there in the living room, you know what I mean? I was playing with my little toy, whatever, in the living room. And so they sat on the couch, and I just remember just looking at Miss O'Willen. There was just something just calming about her that just reminded me of my mom. This lady here, like I don't know, it was just like a connection I just had with her, and she was so soft spoken. Just the way she talked, like you could just hear the tone, like it was no aggression behind it. It was just like the soft voice, and it just reminded me of all the years I just spent with my mom growing up in Nigeria. And I was like, well, damn, this might be somebody that might be able to understand what I'm trying to say and the perspective I'm trying to come from. And it was just something about my mom that kind of resonated with me with her. I was like, okay, my mom obviously, you knew when she was serious, but she just had this calmness about her. You know what I mean? It's just that her presence alone shut the whole room down. She didn't have to say anything, but you could just feel it. The way she walked, the way she carried herself. Obviously, being a nurse, like went into the house, everything. So, okay, so I saw the same resemblance, the soft spokenness in Miss O'Willender. And so I remember them visiting me at home, and we talked, and everything was kind of being made for me to get placed in her home. And so I was like, okay. And then so that took a few more months or whatnot, about a month or so to kind of get paperwork done, everything kind of situated. And so after keep bouncing around home, I was like, man, okay, things are going to start shifting a little bit. Like a little glimpse of hope. So plans were made for me to join their home. So after joined their home, things started kind of progressing a little bit, but I still had my constant struggle. So I was bouncing around schools. I got changed to different schools. schools after school after school, trying to figure out where I belong. And I remember, they took me to church in Kaysville, and I got introduced to church, to the church body, and they was like, "Oh, this is our new son." So I remember just like that warm, welcoming feeling in church, and then meeting all the teenagers there, like Coach Porter's son. That's when I saw Coach Porter again. I was like, man, like, is this the dude that I just seen in 1998? Like, he looks so familiar, you know what I mean? And once kind of talking to him, everything just kind of connected the dots that way. And I was like, wow, it's crazy how life works. And so we connected like that. So I bounced around at a time. And so I was moved around, and this was about like fifth grade. So after fifth grade, I got placed in Sunset Elementary. Those labels still follow me there. I got in trouble a lot. There was an issue with Pokemon cards. They were banned from the school at the time. And so I told you I was by myself all the time. Nobody would accept me in their social groups, and I was isolated. I was bullied. I was called useless. I was called dumb, and still isolated a lot. And so uh, I just was running out to recess by myself. And so I saw the kids with Pokemon cards, and I said, hey, I'm going to go tattletale. And so I just ran out to recess. And the moment I came back to class, walking back to class from recess, the DJ reported the principal's office. So I was like, okay, here we go again. It was just like no other ordinary day. And so I remember going to the principal's office, and the principal was a lady. And so she said, call your father, Mr. Lester. I was like, okay. And he worked at Hill Air Force Base at the time. So I said, okay. So I picked up the phone. I called him. She said, yeah, you expelled from school. Tell him to come pick you up. So I'm like, huh? Like, I didn't even know what expelled meant. I didn't know anything at all. So I called him on the phone. I was, hey, like, this lady said to call you, told you that I'm expelled. And so he said, what? Like, for what? I said, I don't know. She said something about mother efforts or something. I don't know what that means. And so he was like, well, give her the phone. And I remember handing the phone to her, and he literally was just chewing her on the phone. Like, my son doesn't even know what that means. And like, they was getting into an argument. So me, I'm just like, okay, whatever that means. Like, I just sat there so eventually he came to the school, and the gist of it that I caught was the principal said that the kids came in and was telling her it was multiple kids, students that told her that I was calling mother effers and all this stuff like this. So I asked her, I said, what is a mother effer? She's like, you know exactly what it means. Stop lying. You're always constantly lying. You're always trying to cause problems. So we won't have that issue anymore. So I was like, okay, whatever. And so I remember we were walking out of school, and the kids just started laughing and pointing at me like, he, ha, 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 ha. You know what I'm saying? And so I started chasing after him, to go beat him up, literally. And so when that happened, we ended up leaving the school. So I got called from that to go to Hillfield Elementary. So that's why I got placed in Hillfield Elementary, because I got expelled from that school. That was kind of like almost towards the second half of that year, my fifth grade year. So that's when I got placed in the CARES program at Hillfield. So I would take the bus to school at Hillfield Elementary, and I got placed in the CARES program. And so they call it the resource class. So I got placed with Miss Flanagan. And so when I got placed in that program, I was still trying to find my identity. I was just like, okay, well, here we go, another school, another round of, things that kind of start off, the way they did, and then kind of end up how they did. So I'm trying to figure out what the next school is. And so obviously things started progressing. I started kind of building a relationship with Miss Flanagan. And I remember things started going the same way. Started fighting all the time again. Recess one day. And so, kids had started calling me all these demeaning names, Blackie and Darky again. Here I was again, like, okay, here we go again. And so some kid was making fun of me, so I shoved him on the ground. I told him to stop. He wouldn't stop. So eventually I was like, okay, enough is enough. So I shoved him to the ground. And so I got called to get talked to. So Miss Flanagan pulled me aside. She said, hey, she gave me probably like the best advice. She said, look, you know that kid over there? I said, who? The name was like Johnny or something. I was like, yeah, why? He said, do you know why he gets all the stuff he gets? I'm like, what is that supposed to mean? I don't care. Like, so if you want to get something like him or be like him, you have to do exactly what he's doing. He's getting all his grades right. He does the right thing, etc. I'm like, okay, what that means? Like, she's like, yeah, just do everything he does. Just copy what he does. So I'm like, okay, like, is that what he's supposed to do? Like, she's like, yeah. And so we had a conversation. I connected my heart, whatever. So I said, well, let me just try this. So that's when I started kind of like trying to copycat everything he did. I'm trying to do the right thing, etc. I mean, so obviously things kind of started getting better a little bit. But I was like, okay, I could start trusting her just a little bit, to have a relationship with her. And So that kind of progressed our relationship with her in fifth grade. And then that went on as we finished that year. Like I said, I don't know what happened with the program at the time. So I was like, okay, what happened? So I went from Hillfield to Clinton Elementary for sixth grade year. After that year in fifth grade, I finished at Hillfield. And I was trying to figure out why I was moved, like why things happened the way they did, but I couldn't, like nobody told me anything at the time. So I was like, okay, it's just go to Clinton Elementary. And so that was the first time I got on a bike and some rollerblades. And so I used to rollerblade to school and ride my bike to school in sixth grade. And sixth grade was going on, everything was happening. So things got kind of moved to me moving, getting ready to go to Salt Lake Christian Academy. And after Salt Lake Christian Academy was supposed to happen, that school shut down that year. And then that's when Coach Sport and then came to Layton Christian Academy. And so, like I said, while church was happening, things were made for me to go to Layton Christian Academy. So, like I said, so my seventh grade year, plans were made for me to come to Layton Christian Academy. And after that year, so things were made, and I came to Layton Christian Academy my seventh grade year, and that's how I came to Layton Christian. I was a rough seventh grader. So things happened. And so once I got to Layton Christian Academy, that's when everything kind of like started kind of was like, okay, like I was just still trying to figure myself out then. So I tried to figure things out late in Christian Academy. Things started kind of going like they're supposed to for the most part, but I was still trying to figure out my identity. Mr. Willis started taking heed, but I was still holding on to getting back home and trying to figure things out like I was supposed to. Academy. So I was dealing with a lot at the time. Yeah, it was the constant moving around and court and whatnot. So it was a lot to deal with, mentally, emotionally. It was just uh, a lot of draining that I thought, something to go through from 10 uh, to 14. Those years in the foster care in and out. It was something that mentally, was exhausting for me. And then yet alone, still trying to get in contact with my parents and my mom at the time, my family back in Nigeria. But like I said, even when life felt impossible, there were moments, some moments that where someone saw me. That was kind of uh, Miss Flanagan, and Miss O'Willender. Those are two people who kind of saw me for the most part. But overall, it was devastating thing to kind of have and do. Just kind of going through that. Even when life felt impossible at the time, a spark of hope appeared towards the back end, and I went through all that and throughout middle school dealing with a lot of stuff and just trying to figure out my identity where I belong. I dealt with a lot. I was growing up at 10 years old. I was still trying to get in contact with mother at the time, in and out of court left and right, going to so many different homes, accusing so many things I didn't do, feeling like you walk on eggshells, feeling like you didn't belong anywhere, trying to find your sense of identity. It was just a lot to deal with.